The biodome's transparent panels were more scars than glass now, each crack a testament to humanity's brutal struggle. Dr. Elena Rodriguez pressed her palm against the compromised surface, feeling the heat of the scorched Chilean landscape seeping through. Outside, what was once a lush research corridor had become a wasteland. Red dust and skeletal remnants of vegetation stretching to the horizon. 37 years old, Alina had spent the last decade of her life in this dying facility. Her team had dwindled from hundreds to just 7. Each survivor a specialist who understood that abandoning this research center meant giving up on humanity's last hope of understanding something greater than its own destruction. The quantum telescope array was her obsession, a cobbled-together marvel of human ingenuity that shouldn't have worked, but did. Salvaged components from abandoned observatories, quantum processors rescued from flooded data centers in Mumbai, optical systems pieced together from the remnants of the European Space Agency's final archive. It was a machine born of desperation, assembled by people who knew they were humanity's last shot at something miraculous. "Systems check," Alina muttered into her comm unit. Her voice was dry, cracked from days of minimal hydration. Water was more precious than any research funding now. Miguel Oliveira, the facility's chief engineer, responded with a static-laden grunt. "Primary quantum array is holding at 62% efficiency. We got maybe 36 hours before total system failure." Elena knew what that meant. 36 hours to discover something. Anything that might justify their continued existence. The global environmental collapse had reduced human civilization to scattered survival pods. Communication was intermittent. Resources were beyond scarce. And here they were, in this last bastion of scientific hope, watching the universe through a technological miracle that was itself dying. The telescope's display flickered, a constellation of data points that most would dismiss as random noise. But Alina saw patterns, not just patterns, but a structure that defied statistical probability. Her fingers flew across the holographic interface, isolating the signal, running it through decryption algorithms that had been developed by generations of desperate scientists. Something was speaking, not in words, not in any language humanity had ever understood. A proximity alarm shrieked. Miguel's voice cut through the emergency broadcast. "Hull integrity compromised in Sector 3. We're losing atmospheric stability." Elena didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on the display. The signal wasn't random. It was a message. Mathematical. Perfect. Impossible. Outside the biodome, another section of the facility's protective shell cracked. Hot, poisonous wind began to seep through. But inside, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was smiling. The first genuine smile she'd allowed herself in years. Humanity might be dying, but something in the universe was finally ready to talk. The quantum telescope pulsed, and the first truly extraordinary moment of human history was about to begin. The encrypted transmission from the new Santiago research facility cut through the global communication network like a knife. Fragmented, urgent, and utterly impossible to ignore. In Beijing, General Li Wentao studied the decoded message with a mixture of skepticism and barely contained excitement. The quantum signal analysis reports spread across his holographic display were unlike anything he'd seen in his 30 years of military intelligence. His fingers, scared from decades of conflict, traced the mathematical patterns that defied conventional understanding. "This is either the most elaborate scientific fraud in human history," he muttered, "or something far more significant." Thousands of kilometers away, Dr. Aisha Okik in Lagos was less diplomatic. The lead of the African Continental Science Consortium slammed her fist on the conference table, silencing the room full of fractious scientists and political representatives. "We are discussing the potential first contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence," she declared, her voice cutting through the background noise of emergency generators and distant conflict alarms. "And instead of acting, we're engaged in our typical human circus of bureaucratic nonsense." The video conference was a testament to humanity's fragile unity. Representatives from what remained of the world's governments and scientific institutions were connected through a patchwork of salvaged communication technologies. Some appeared as crisp holographic projections, others as grainy, flickering images that threatened to disappear at any moment. Dr. Elena Rodriguez would have to convince them all. Her transmission began with raw data, mathematical sequences that seemed to dance between perfect logic and impossible creativity. The signal's structure suggested intelligence, but not in any way they had ever conceived. It was a language of pure potential, of mathematical concepts that seemed to breathe and transform even as they were observed. The signal is not just a message, Elena explained, her voice steady despite the facility's failing systems. It's a challenge, a test of some kind. General Lai leaned forward. A test for what? Behind Elena, Miguel Oliveira worked frantically, routing emergency power to keep the transmission stable. The biodome's environmental systems were collapsing, but they would maintain communication at any cost. Dr. O'Keefe was the first to truly understand. It's a filter, she said softly. A way to determine if a civilization is worth. What? Contacting. Acknowledging. The global team began to dissect the signal. Mathematicians from Mumbai worked alongside quantum physicists from disbanded European research centers. Linguists who had once studied dead languages now tried to decode a communication that existed beyond language itself. They had 36 hours. 36 hours to solve a puzzle that might determine humanity's fate. The irony was not lost on anyone. A species that had spent centuries fighting itself now had to prove its collective worth to an unknown intelligence. Territorial boundaries dissolved. Political differences became meaningless. For the first time in generations, humanity looked outward with a single, unified purpose. Outside the failing biodome in New Santiago, the desert wind howled. Inside, Dr. Elena Rodriguez allowed herself a moment of hope. Humanity had always been at its best when facing impossible odds. The universe was watching, and humanity was about to prove why it deserved to be noticed. Vornak adjusted the quantum stabilization field around his observation pod, his six-fingered hands moving with the precision of a surgeon. To human eyes, he would have appeared both alien and familiar, bipedal, but with skin that shifted between translucent blues and deep indigos, reflecting his emotional state. The Dyson Confederation's archival records of humanity stretched back centuries. Vornak had dedicated his entire professional life, nearly 2 human centuries, to studying this most perplexing of emerging species. Where other xenosociologists saw only chaos, he perceived something far more complex. Initiate primary observation protocol. He commanded the ship's AI, his translation implant converting his native clicking language into standard galactic communication. Holographic displays materialized around him, each screen showing a different slice of human history. Conflict, destruction, but also remarkable, unexpected moments of collective brilliance. The current observation team believed humanity should be permanently quarantined. Their rationale was simple and seemingly irrefutable. A species that had nearly destroyed its own planet multiple times, that engaged in continuous warfare, that seemed perpetually on the brink of self-annihilation, could not be trusted with broader galactic engagement. But Vornak knew better. He remembered the medical breakthrough during the global pandemic of 2030, when scientists from competing nations and corporations set aside their differences to develop a universal vaccine in record time. He recalled the environmental restoration projects in the Sahel region, where local communities had transformed dying landscapes through collective, innovative action. Most compelling were the moments of unexpected unity, when humanity faced seemingly insurmountable challenges and transformed them into opportunities. The current signal changed everything. Analyze transmission parameters. Vornak instructed the ship's computational matrix. The mathematical sequence was unlike anything in the Confederation's extensive records. Most species, when presented with such a complex signal, would approach it linearly, systematically breaking down each component, seeking a logical progression. Humans were different. The preliminary data suggested they were treating the signal as a holistic puzzle, not just a mathematical challenge, but a form of communication that transcended traditional computational thinking. Each attempted solution seemed to reframe the entire problem, introducing variables that the Confederation's standard first contact algorithms couldn't process. Confederacy leadership would soon convene to discuss humanity's status. The recommendation would be clear: continued quarantine, possibly permanent isolation. Vornak knew he would be the lone dissenting voice. A junior researcher entered the observation pod, her exoskeleton still rippling with youthful uncertainty. Senior analyst, she clicked, the humans are attempting something unprecedented with the signal. Our predictive models are failing. Vornak's skin shifted to a deep, contemplative purple. Precisely, he responded. And that is exactly why they are worth watching. Outside the observation pod, the vast machinery of the Dyson Confederation continued its ancient methodical processes. Billions of star systems monitored, countless emerging civilizations catalogued and classified. But something was different about humanity, something that made the universe hold its collective breath. And Vornak was determined to understand why. The global team assembled in a virtual workspace that defied traditional boundaries, a digital nexus where brilliance knew no nationality, no discipline, no limitation. Dr. Priya Sharma from Mumbai sat cross-legged on the floor of her family's rebuilt apartment, holographic displays dancing around her. Her fingers moved like a concert pianist's, translating mathematical concepts into living, breathing visualizations. Beside her, a painting by her grandmother, rescued from the floods that had destroyed their previous home, watched silently. "It's not just mathematics," she muttered, manipulating the signal's components. "It's a language of potential." Half a world away, Marcus Chen, a street artist turned quantum computational theorist, was drawing. Not on a digital interface, but on a massive wall salvaged from a collapsed research center in San Francisco. Chalk, paint, mathematical equations, and abstract art merged into a single, impossible landscape of thought. The signal wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a conversation to be understood. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the failing biodome, coordinating the most diverse team of problem solvers humanity had ever assembled. Indigenous mathematicians from the Amazon worked alongside retired cryptographers. Climate refugees collaborated with quantum physicists. A teenager from a Nigerian refugee camp provided a breakthrough that stumped MIT's most senior researchers. The signal responds to creativity, Elena explained during their daily briefing. Not just logical progression, but imaginative interpretation. Marcus's wall became their primary interface. Each equation was a brushstroke, each mathematical transformation a piece of performance art. They were rewriting the very concept of problem solving. The indigenous mathematician, Rosa Mamani, brought something unexpected. Traditional Quechua mathematical concepts, which viewed numbers as living entities with relationships, not just abstract quantities. Her approach introduced a dimensional understanding that linear Western mathematics could never capture. "Numbers breathe," Rosa explained. "They have stories. They're not just symbols. They're living relationships." Their collective approach began to reveal the signal's true nature. It wasn't a test of computational power, but of collective imagination. Each team member brought a unique perspective: cultural, artistic, scientific, philosophical. A deep programmer from Seoul used visual language theory to reinterpret mathematical sequences. A climate adaptation specialist from Bangladesh saw ecological patterns in the signal structure. A recovered AI system, originally designed for urban planning, provided insights that human researchers had missed. 24 hours into their collaboration, something extraordinary happened. The signal began to change, not because they were solving it, but because they were communicating with it, responding to it, dancing with it. "We're not decoding," Priya realized. "We're conversing." Outside the new Santiago biodome, the world continued its struggle for survival. But inside this virtual space, Humanity was demonstrating why it was worth saving, not through individual brilliance, but through collective, creative intelligence. The universe watched, and for the first time, it seemed to be truly listening. The transmission erupted from the quantum telescope like a living thing, not a signal, but a symphony of mathematical potential that defied every known principle of communication. In the dying biodome, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched in stunned silence as the holographic displays transformed. What began as a structured mathematical sequence exploded into a three-dimensional landscape of interconnected concepts, cultural memories, and impossible geometries. "It's responding," Miguel Oliveira whispered, his voice a mixture of awe and terror. "Not just responding. It's engaging." The global team fell silent across their distributed network. Priya Sharma in Mumbai saw the mathematical structures breathe and shift, incorporating elements of her team's creative solutions. Marcus Chen's abstract wall of equations seemed to pulse, its chalk lines bleeding into the digital transmission like living ink. This was no mere answer. This was a dialogue. The Dyson Confederation's monitoring stations went into immediate alert. Vornak's observation pod filled with frantic communication streams, his colleagues demanding immediate quarantine, complete isolation of the human transmission. But the signal continued to evolve. It carried more than information. It carried context, cultural memory, the very essence of human creativity, manifested as a mathematical language that was simultaneously a form of art, communication, and pure potential. Rosa Mamani's indigenous mathematical concepts appeared embedded in the transmission. Number systems that viewed quantities as living relationships, not just static values. The DEEF programmer's visual language theory transformed sections of the signal into landscapes of meaning that transcended traditional communication. "They're not just solving the puzzle," Vornak murmured to his junior researcher. "They're rewriting the entire concept of communication." The transmission contained layers impossible to comprehend through linear thinking. Ecological patterns intertwined with quantum probabilities. Cultural memories became mathematical transformations. The very act of observation changed the signal structure. 36 hours after the initial detection, humanity had done something no observed civilization had ever accomplished. They hadn't just responded to the signal. They had transformed it, turned it into a living conversation that challenged the most fundamental understanding of intelligence. In the Dyson Confederation's central archives, centuries of first contact protocols crumbled. Elena Rodriguez understood first. This wasn't a test to be passed. This was an invitation to a conversation that had never been possible before. Humanity wasn't trying to prove its worth. It was demonstrating its fundamental nature: adaptive, creative, impossibly complex. The biodome's environmental systems gave a final desperate warning. Power was failing. Communication would soon be impossible. But the signal remained. Alive, breathing, waiting. The universe held its breath. Something extraordinary was happening. The diplomatic vessel emerged from quantum transition like a wounded predator, its sleek design marred by unexpected vulnerability. Vornak watched from the observation deck as the ship's quantum stabilizers flickered, revealing technological seams that should have been seamless. This was not the grand entrance of a superior civilization. This was something far more complex. 3 diplomats descended, representatives of the Dyson Confederation's most conservative faction. Their exoskeletons shifted with defensive algorithms, preparing for any potential threat. They expected a primitive species, a civilization to be studied, contained, potentially eliminated. They were spectacularly wrong. Dr. Elena Rodriguez waited in what remained of the new Santiago research facility. The biodome was more patched than original structure, its transparent walls a mosaic of salvaged materials. Behind her, the global team that had solved the impossible signal stood in quiet defiance. "We are not here to impress you," Elena began, her first words cutting through diplomatic protocols like a laser. "We are here to engage." The lead diplomat, a crystalline being named Zartok, expected a technical presentation. Instead, he received something far more dangerous, a narrative of survival. Elena walked them through humanity's recent history, not a sanitized diplomatic brief, but a raw, unfiltered account of near extinction and renewal. The global pandemic that nearly collapsed human civilization. The climate disasters that redrew continents. The resource wars that threatened to destroy everything. And then, the moments of transformation. She showed them how communities in the Sahel had transformed dying landscapes, how refugee networks had developed more efficient medical systems than traditional governments, how individuals from completely different backgrounds had come together to solve the impossible signal. Zartok's defensive algorithms began to malfunction. The diplomatic team's quantum adaptive translation systems struggled to process what they were witnessing. This was not a presentation. This was a demonstration of a species' fundamental nature. Vornak, observing remotely, felt something approaching excitement. His colleagues saw chaos. He saw potential. The human team didn't just present their achievements. They revealed their process. The indigenous mathematician explained how traditional knowledge systems informed their approach to the signal. The street artist demonstrated how creativity was a form of problem-solving. The climate refugee showed how adaptation was their most profound technology. "We are not asking to join your civilization," Elena said, her final statement a strategic masterpiece. "We are offering a different way of understanding existence." The diplomatic vessel's systems continued to flicker, not from technical failure, but from something far more profound. The humans were rewriting the very concept of first contact. Vornak knew, in that moment, that everything was about to change. The universe watched, and for the first time, it was genuinely curious about what humanity might do next. The negotiation chamber was unlike any diplomatic space in galactic history. Instead of a sterile, controlled environment, it resembled a living archive of human resilience. Fragments of recovered art hung alongside technological remnants. A wall of soil samples from restored landscapes stood next to quantum computational displays. Each object told a story of survival, of transformation. Zartok and the Dyson Confederation diplomats found themselves completely off balance. "We are presenting 3 potential engagement models," Elena Rodriguez began, her voice calm and precise. Behind her, a diverse team of human representatives stood, each representing a different approach to survival, each embodying a unique aspect of human potential. Vornak, observing remotely, felt something approaching excitement. This was not a typical negotiation. This was a demonstration of a species' fundamental nature. The first model was radical collaborative engagement. Humanity proposed a new form of interstellar cooperation that wasn't about technological exchange, but about adaptive problem-solving. They suggested creating dynamic networks that could rapidly respond to cosmic challenges: ecological, technological, social. Rosa Mameni, the indigenous mathematician, stepped forward. Her presentation integrated traditional knowledge systems with quantum computational theory, a fusion that the alien diplomats had never conceived possible. She demonstrated how indigenous understanding of ecological relationships could revolutionize planetary restoration technologies. The second model challenged the very concept of galactic membership. Humans weren't asking to join an existing system. They were proposing to create something entirely new, a fluid, adaptive network of civilizations that could learn and transform together. Marcus Chen, the street artist turned quantum theorist, presented a visual representation that was part mathematical model, part living artwork. It showed how creativity could be a fundamental problem-solving mechanism, not just a decorative skill. The third model was the most radical: complete transparency. Humanity would share its entire developmental history, including its failures, not as a show of weakness, but as a testament to its ability to learn, adapt, and transform. Zartok's defensive algorithms began to malfunction. The diplomatic team's quantum adaptive translation systems struggled to process what they were witnessing. Dr. Preya Sharma revealed humanity's most vulnerable moments, the climate disasters, the resource wars, the pandemics. But each presentation of destruction was immediately followed by a narrative of renewal, of collective problem-solving. "We are not asking for permission," Elena said, her final statement, a strategic masterpiece. "We are offering a partnership that transforms the very concept of cosmic engagement." The negotiation chamber fell silent. The alien diplomats realized they were not dealing with a species to be studied or contained. They were encountering something far more dangerous and exciting. Vornak knew, in that moment, that everything was about to change. The universe watched, and for the first time, it was genuinely curious about what humanity might propose next. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of first contact. The moment stretched across multiple dimensions of possibility. Vornak watched from the observation pod as humanity's first true cosmic engagement unfolded, a process so unprecedented that it would rewrite galactic archives for millennia to come. The quantum communication channels pulsed with a living energy that defied traditional diplomatic protocols. The Dyson Confederation's central archives began to transform, not through external manipulation, but through the very nature of humanity's engagement. Each transmission was a living thing, part mathematical sequence, part cultural memory, part pure potential. On Earth, in the remains of the new Santiago Research Facility, Dr. Elena Rodriguez understood something profound. This wasn't a moment of triumph. This was a beginning. The global team that had solved the impossible signal now stood as humanity's first true cosmic ambassadors. They weren't scientists or diplomats in the traditional sense. They were translators of potential, individuals who understood that survival was less about technology and more about adaptability. Rosa Mamani's indigenous mathematical models merged with quantum computational theories. Marcus Chen's artistic interpretations became a new form of interstellar communication. The climate refugees' adaptive technologies suggested solutions to problems the Dyson Confederation hadn't even recognized. Zartok and the diplomatic team found themselves transformed. Their rigid hierarchical systems began to shift, absorbing the fundamental lesson of human engagement. Complexity is not a weakness, but the most profound strength. The universe itself seemed to pause. Humanity wasn't joining the galactic community. They were proposing an entirely new model of cosmic interaction. Not conquest, not submission, not even collaboration in the traditional sense. This was something entirely new. Vornak transmitted a message that would become legendary in xenosociological archives. Humanity does not adapt to existing systems. They transform the very concept of systemic interaction. The first wave of human exploration would not be about territorial expansion. It would be about problem-solving, ecological restoration, cultural exchange that went beyond simple communication, a true sharing of adaptive potential. The quantum signal that had started everything continued to evolve. It was no longer just a message. It was a living conversation that expanded with each moment of engagement. Earth itself began to change. The global cooperative that had formed to solve the initial signal didn't disband. It transformed into humanity's first true planetary coordination network. The biodomes that had been humanity's last refuge became laboratories of cosmic potential. "We are not here to be studied," Elena Rodriguez's final transmission read. "We are here to engage, to transform, to expand the very concept of what's possible." The Dyson Confederation's most conservative members would argue for decades. The most progressive would see the true potential immediately. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had turned first contact into a mutual transformation. The universe held its breath. And then, finally, it began to exhale.